Right here, beneath this parking lot, was Hitler's last refuge. 30 feet underground, for 105 days, the Führer planned, raged, and met his end.
April 1945. Soviet forces closing in everywhere. The 1,000-year Reich had weeks to live.
Inside these walls, the most destructive regime in history made its final decisions.
Today, I'm taking you inside, hour by hour, into the Führer's last days. This is the Führer's last days.
By April of 1945, Berlin was no longer a city. It was a graveyard. Soviet forces, 2.5 million strong, had surrounded the German capital from every direction. The skies burned, the streets crumbled, and the people had nowhere left to run. Inside shattered buildings, families huddled in basements, listening to the thunder of artillery, growing closer and closer with every passing hour. The war that Adolf Hitler had started 6 years earlier was now consuming the very heart of his empire. And yet, 30 feet beneath the burning streets of Berlin, in a concrete shelter known as the Führerbunker, the man responsible for it all refused to accept what every general, every soldier, every civilian already knew. Germany had lost. The question now was not whether Berlin would fall. The question was, how many more would die before one man finally accepted the truth? Hitler had moved into the Führerbunker permanently on January 16, 1945. The bunker sat 30 feet underground beneath the Reich Chancellery Garden in central Berlin. It consisted of 30 rooms divided into 2 levels. The upper bunker housed staff and servants. The lower bunker, that was Hitler's domain. His bedroom, his study, his map room, his world. The walls were concrete, 1.8 meters thick. Outside, Berlin burned. Inside, time seemed to stand still. Military briefings at noon, dinner at midnight, sleep in the early hours of the morning. He refused to look out windows, refused to see the destruction, refused to acknowledge what his own eyes would have confirmed. The Reich he had promised would last 1,000 years was measured now, not in centuries, not in decades, but in days. If you want to discover more truths about military history, subscribe to our channel right now. Don't forget to like this video. It helps us a lot to produce more high-quality documentaries. And please, leave a comment below sharing your opinions or a story about veterans in your family. Thanks for watching. The atmosphere was suffocating. Generals arrived daily, delivering news that grew worse with every briefing. Army Group Vistula obliterated. The Ninth Army encircled. The relief forces Hitler ordered to Berlin, they never came. Because inside the Führerbunker, truth was the one thing no one was permitted to speak. Tension. Hitler moved phantom armies across his maps. He ordered divisions that no longer existed. to hold positions that had already fallen. His generals stood in silence, nodding, knowing that every order was meaningless. Outside, Soviet artillery crept closer. The thunder of their guns could now be heard inside the bunker itself. The concrete walls vibrated with every impact. And still, Hitler planned, Hitler ordered, Hitler believed.
On April 20th, 1945, Adolf Hitler turned 56 years old. It would be his last birthday. A small ceremony was held in the bunker. Senior Nazi officials arrived to pay their respects. Hermann Göring, Heinrich Himmler, Joseph Goebbels, many of them for the last time. They urged Hitler to flee Berlin, to move the command to the south, to the so-called Alpine Fortress in the Bavarian mountains. Hitler refused. He would stay in Berlin, he said. He would lead the defense personally. He would turn the tide. Within days, Göring would attempt to seize power and be expelled from the Nazi Party. Himmler would open secret negotiations with the Western Allies behind Hitler's back and be branded a traitor. One by one, the men who had built the Third Reich with Hitler were abandoning him. And still, he remained underground, waiting, planning, believing. By April 22nd, Soviet forces had broken into Berlin itself. Street by street, block by block, house by house. The fighting was unlike anything the world had ever seen. German soldiers, many of them teenagers from the Hitler Youth, fought alongside old men from the Volkssturm, the last desperate reserve of a dying regime. They fought with whatever they had. Rifles, Panzerfausts, bare hands, against a Soviet army that had been waiting 3 years for this moment. Inside the bunker, Hitler received the news that Soviet troops had entered the city. For the first time, something inside him broke. He screamed at his generals. He accused them of betrayal, of cowardice, of deliberately losing the war. And then, something unexpected happened. Hitler grew quiet. He sat down. He stared at his maps. And for the first time since the war began, he admitted to those around him that the war was lost. On April 28th, two extraordinary things happened inside the Führerbunker. Hitler discovered that Himmler, the man he had trusted above almost all others, had been secretly negotiating surrender with the Western Allies. The betrayal shattered him. He had Himmler's representative arrested and executed in the bunker garden that same night. And then, in the early hours of April 29th, Adolf Hitler married Eva Braun. If you want to discover more truths about military history, subscribe to our channel right now. Don't forget to like this video. It helps us a lot to produce more high-quality documentaries. And please, leave a comment below sharing your opinions or a story about veterans in your family. Thanks for watching. 12 years, who had followed him into the bunker when she could have fled to safety, who had chosen to die beside him rather than live without him. The ceremony lasted minutes. Afterward, Hitler retired to his study and dictated his final political testament. He blamed the Jews for the war. He blamed his generals for the defeat. He
appointed a successor government. And he gave instructions for what should happen to his body. He did not want to be captured. He did not want to be displayed. He had seen what had happened to Mussolini. April 30th, 1945. It was a Monday. Outside the bunker, Soviet forces were less than 500 meters from the Reich Chancellery. The sound of battle was constant now, unavoidable, everywhere. At approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, Adolf Hitler said goodbye to the staff remaining in the bunker. He shook hands. He spoke quietly. Some who were there said he seemed almost calm. He returned to his private quarters with Eva Braun. At approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, a single gunshot was heard. When the door was opened, Adolf Hitler was dead. A self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Eva Braun had taken cyanide. Their bodies were carried to the Reich Chancellery garden above, doused in petrol, and set on fire as Soviet shells fell around them. The man who had started the deadliest conflict in human history was gone.
The world would not learn of Hitler's death for 2 days.
On May 1st, German radio announced that Hitler had fallen, fighting to his last breath against Bolshevism. It was a lie. One final lie from a regime built on lies. The truth emerged slowly in the days and weeks that followed. On May 8th, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. But the reckoning was just beginning.
The Nuremberg trials would expose the full scale of the Nazi crimes to a horrified world. 6 million Jewish men, women, and children murdered in the Holocaust. Tens of millions more killed across Europe and beyond. Cities reduced to rubble. Families torn apart. A continent left in ruins. All of it traceable back to decisions made in that bunker beneath Berlin.
History does not forget, and it should not. The Führerbunker itself was partially demolished by the Soviets after the war. What remained was buried, covered over, a parking lot built above it, as if concrete and asphalt could bury what happened there. They cannot. Block 9B. Today, a small information board marks the site. Easy to miss, easy to walk past. But beneath your feet, if you stand in that parking lot in central Berlin, the bunker is still there. Partial, silent, a reminder that the decisions of one man in one room, 30 feet underground, changed the course of human history for the worse. The lesson of the Führerbunker is not complicated. Power without accountability, ideology without truth, and silence in the face of evil lead here every time. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Truly. Stories like this one are not easy to tell, and they are not easy to hear, but they must be told. Because the moment we stop looking history in the eye is the moment history finds a way to repeat itself. If this video meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this,
subscribe to Vance War Files. Every week, we go deeper into the battles, the decisions, and the human stories that shaped the world we live in today. Until next time, I'm Dr. Vance, and this was Hitler's Last Days.
Thank you so much for traveling back in time with us today. If this story moved you, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss our next historic journey. Before you go, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your interaction keeps this history alive. Until next time, this is Dr. Vance, signing off.